Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, I want to talk about the next big thing that's on their docket after the Jalen Ramsey trade, and that's TJ Watt's contract, but why the Ramsey trade, I think, is a good sign that the Watt contract is going to get done. That and taking a lot of your questions here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. More on them later. All right, Steelers fans. Let's dive into a few things here. We're going to get back to taking calls with this episode and get back to that kind of regularly throughout the next several episodes because so many of you have left calls and we only got 20 days before training camp, before Steelers report to training camp. 20 days. Less than 3 weeks, y'all. That's crazy how fast time flies. But with that, we're going to be trying to get through a lot of your questions, so we'll do more of that. But let's talk for a minute. We still don't have the official contract and official numbers and salary cap numbers of what the Jalen Ramsey trade with Johnny Smith and Mika's contract going out, what all that's going to do to the salary cap. I saw on Spot Rack it listed the Steelers as $11 million over. It doesn't really add up when I looked at the over the cap numbers. That's something I am trying to still fully understand. Admittedly, contract and salary cap numbers are not how those work in trades and transactions. That's not my forte in understanding football. So we'll try to get some answer to that when we get a chance. But what I can talk about is why I think the Ramsey trade is more of a sign that the Watt signing is expected to happen, because I really think that there is a link between why the Steelers specifically wanted to get someone like Jalen Ramsey for this defense in this short term that is directly linked to them thinking that TJ Watt is definitely going to be around for the next 2, 3, maybe at most 4 more seasons. And it's because Jalen Ramsey, more so than Minkah Fitzpatrick, is going to be able to help, I guess, the very thing that has kind of slowed up the chance for TJ Watt to be a playmaker as well as the Steelers pass rush, and that's the quick release of the ball. Now, we talked about this more with Nick Farabaugh yesterday's episode, but I want to tie that into just think about what the Steelers have been trying to be in recent years. And they're a team that's won with defense, but primarily they've been winning with their pass rush. They're guys, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, they've been getting after the quarterback regularly, and TJ Watt has been a menace. But when teams neutralize TJ Watt, it's A, when they're clogging him up with multiple blockers, but also B, they're getting the ball out so quickly against the Steelers secondary. And there have been times when the Steelers secondary has been able to keep it to a minimum and force quarterbacks to hold on to the ball. But when you have cornerback play that you're not confident can win close to the line of scrimmage more consistently, you're going to have a situation where more of those guys are going to get open faster. And if they're getting open faster, that means the ball's coming out quicker. If the ball's coming out quicker, then the pass rush doesn't have as much time to develop. And then TJ Watt doesn't get to make some of those plays where he fights through a tight end and then a tackle and then gets to the quarterback or forces the quarterback to step up into the pocket, and Alex Highsmith comes from the other direction. But Jalen Ramsey does have a chance to impact that. Remember, Minkah Fitzpatrick would typically line up 10, 15, 20 yards off the line of scrimmage because he has to be the free safety, because he was the best last line of defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And with that, he couldn't help regularly as much at the line of scrimmage against those quick passes. But now Jalen Ramsey is going to join a cornerback room with several guys who can be used to either using their physicality or their guile as an experienced cornerback in the NFL to disrupt receivers from getting open that quickly. Joey Porter Jr. is very good working in the press. And I think that people, they look at the raw numbers of the penalties that he's gotten in his career and they think, oh, he's just, he just gets called for penalties all the time everywhere. it's more so he gets called for penalties in bunches when he kind of starts to make mental errors, but a lot of those come towards the end of the route rather than at the start of a route. And I think that's more of a sign that if Joey Porter Jr. can shore up the things at the end of covering a route, which is what we've talked about with Gerald Alexander. I think the Steelers DB's coach, that's going to be one of his biggest tasks, is trying to get Joey Porter Jr. to just trust his work, not grabs onto somebody when the ball's in the air, because I think Joey Porter Jr. does a really good job throughout the rest of what he does in coverage. It's why he's only given up 1 or 2 touchdowns in his first couple of years in the NFL. He hasn't been picked on for scores, just for penalties that he's committed while the ball's in the air, or at the end when he thinks that he just didn't do something right. But again, if he eliminates that, he has so many other things in his tool bag that make him a tough cornerback to face, especially when it comes to wide receivers getting off the line. And in the past couple of years, the Steelers haven't had a guy who could just kind of handle you at the line of scrimmage to pair with Joey Porter Jr. That's where Jalen Ramsey could be a difference maker. From Dante Jackson to Patrick Peterson, that was not their forte. Patrick Peterson, an experienced guy who's going to play off a little bit, use some zone, and try to just use his experience to try to bait you into a bad move, but ultimately just keep the play in front of him so that he's not a liability. Dante Jackson, more of a speedster guy who was a good veteran and could make some solid plays here and there, but wasn't the kind of guy that was going to get up in your face, jam you at the line of scrimmage, and force you to go the way he wants you to go, and to kind of make it so that you couldn't just get open regularly right off the snap of the football. But that is what Jalen Ramsey can do and has done a lot in his career. And finally, that film study that I talked to you guys about on Jalen Ramsey, that should be up today. So if you haven't read that, if you didn't read first of all, I did do a pre-analysis of the film study that kind of highlighted why Jalen Ramsey was the move, and what advanced statistics kind of show what the Steelers are trying to do there. That came out on Wednesday. Then the film study should come out today, this Thursday, all in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all my written work there. But more and more what I see out of Ramsey is a guy who he can win at the line of scrimmage, and he can still bait quarterbacks into bad decisions. And so he's going to have the experience, and he's also so flexible because, again, he could play left outside, right outside, left slot, right slot, move all around. He could play in the box a little bit and help against the run and help jump short passes and swing passes and screens. He is a very instinctual player while willing to be physical, willing to be aggressive, and all those things work. But again, you're not getting a guy like that if you think TJ Watt isn't coming back. You're not getting rid of a captain, a leader like Minkah Fitzpatrick in the role that he was in, unless you think, hey, we're getting this guy because he's gonna work in concert with our pass rush, which we expect to have the best pass rusher of our pass rush available this year. You're not making that move unless you're fairly certain that TJ Watt's going to sign that contract. And that's where I think that the Steelers and Omar Khan and TJ Watt, I think TJ Watt, again, a lot of people have asked me, and we're going to get into that a little bit in the next segment, because there's some people that are getting a little frustrated with the wait for TJ Watt, and I'll dive into those sentiments. But I really think that a big part of this, when it comes to TJ Watt and it comes to his contract and what the negotiations, I think TJ Watt knows, hey, they know I'm going to be there. I know I'm going to be there. My kid just got born in March. I'm gonna hang out with my wife. I'm gonna hang out with my kid, get to know my newborn, take advantage of this time, show up in training camp. We'll get a deal done, and then this will all be behind us. And he'll get a pretty lucrative deal, because I'm pretty sure the Steelers want to give him a lucrative deal. Now, as my colleague Nick Farabaugh points out when he talks about this, and he was on the show yesterday, Nick Farabaugh, PennLive.com, shout out to him. He always does a great job. He points out it might not be the total money that's the problem. It might be the guarantees towards the end of the contract that's the problem. And that could be something that the Steelers maybe have to work their way through with TJ Watt. But I still think they're in a place where they're pretty sure they're going to be able to get it done. And you don't make a move like Jalen Ramsey's unless where you swap out two guys that are similarly in age, similarly in skill and talent level, but just differing in where their talent can contribute. And again, Jalen Ramsey helps against the short passes, which helps the TJ Watt pass rush, whereas Minkah Fitzpatrick keeps the cap on the defense and can still be a turnover creator if the teams are throwing his way more. But I don't think you make that switch that they did, where Jalen Ramsey is going to give you that turnover capabilities, but also help you with the short passing game coverage and maybe increase the amount of time that quarterbacks have to hold on to the ball in general when they play the Steelers now. I don't think you make that move unless you're very confident that TJ Watt's sticking around, because for all the talk about the Steelers are all in, we talked about this with Alan Saunders earlier this week when I said I don't think the Steelers are actually all in right now, because all in means giving up future draft picks that are serious considerations. It means maybe giving up draft picks that would have compromised their plans to get a quarterback in this upcoming 2026 NFL draft class. But they haven't done that. They haven't added crazy void years to so many contracts to try to keep guys around for just these years and pass the buck down the line. None of that's been done by the Steelers. I don't think that they're that all in. But I do think they're trying to win at best with the crew that they can right now. And again, Jalen Ramsey, the way that his contract's going to work and how long he's going to be with the Steelers, he'll be with the Steelers presumably when this TJ Watt deal gets done. It'll probably be a 3-year extension on top of this year. Jalen Ramsey, if he plays out the full extent of his current contract, the way that it looks that the Steelers are inheriting from the Dolphins, his time should be up when TJ Watt's time should be up. So it's kind of like hey, they're planning to kind of pair these guys together for a little bit and see if that works, and still have the flexibility to move on for it if it doesn't work. But I think that's the big thing here. Remember, is that if you're thinking that the Steelers are all in right now, you can't then simultaneously turn around and say, oh yeah, well, they're definitely trading TJ Watt, because if you're trading TJ Watt, this team becomes not nearly as competitive. You lose the best player on the team. And that's where I just don't think that the trade's happening. That's why I don't think that there's going to be this big problem. I think that they're going to come into training camp. It may not happen right away. Probably won't happen right away when training camp starts. But I'm fully certain by September 6th, whatever their first game of the season is, by the time that game comes around, TJ Watt will have signed a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a contract extension. It keeps him around for multiple years, and all things will be moving forward with those plans. But some people got questions about how these negotiations and questioning about TJ Watt's loyalty to the Steelers. I want to talk about that and answer several of your other questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We still got a lot to discuss on this Thursday episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue this show, and we now switch into our call-in line, which we've had to suspend for a few days after the madness that was Monday with the Jalen Ramsey, Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. And plus, we've gotten a lot of your calls since that happened. But again, if you ever have a question, whether it's about that or anything else, call 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute, and we will we get your question on the show at some point here. Thanks to everyone who does call in. Sorry if we don't get to your call right away. Know that we do get those calls. We store them, and we try to work our way through them. But let's go to the phone lines to hear from Paul in Greensburg, because Paul's left several voicemails about this topic, and that's TJ Watt, and he is not happy with the way that TJ Watt has handled these negotiations. And there's some Steelers fans I've seen share this sentiment. So I wanted to give this some airtime and then give you my response to this approach to the conversation. But here's Paul from Greensburg to give you his perspective.
Hi, Chris. This is Paul from Greensburg, PA. This situation with TJ Watt it's very aggravating to me, because he doesn't have the mentality to be a Steeler. You have Steelers like Rocky Bleier, Franco Harris, Joe Green, these guys have all dedicated their life to being a Steeler. This guy just wants the money, and I really like the guy, but I think we can do better. I think we can move on. I mean, he's demanding too much. He's demanding too much, and he really has me upset. And I'm sorry, and it's just a question, but I hope you agree with me because this is upsetting to me. And love your show. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. As always, you can call in like Paul did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, give you a question under a minute. Paul, I hear you. I hear you here, but I got to set you straight because I think you're approaching this the wrong way. TJ Watt is absolutely a Steeler. That dude has fought way too hard and played in way too many big games and carried this team and been a leader for this team while being an example, lead by example guy who doesn't make it about me. He's very much about the weed, about the team. Whenever you hear him talk, that's what he's doing. Now, does he want his payday to hit him? Does he want to make sure that he gets the deal that's worthy of one of the best defensive players in the NFL? It's going to be a Hall of Famer when all's said and done. Absolutely, and he should. That's kind of the point, right? I think that's very much the point with what the Steelers are trying to go for, what any player should go for. I think that there's often this misconstrued way of looking at things where people think from the team side all the time because they root for the team all the time, and they think, oh, well, players should just agree to whatever works for the team. But these are people that, like, if you went to your job, would you just agree for less pay because you just like the name on the side of the building you work for? No, you want to get the most for you and your family. And I know that you probably think, well, that's tens of millions of dollars, or hundreds of millions of dollars. That's so much money. He can get away with that. You're trying to make the most out of the situation that you created to not just support you and your family, but create generational wealth for your kids, their kids, and their kids' kids. Like, I am never against a player going and getting their money. I'll also point out historically, you might want to check some of the names that you said, because you brought up Franco Harris. Franco Harris held out against the Steelers at one point, to the point where Chuck Noll, when asked about it, I believe it was at training camp, he said, Franco who? And that was after Franco Harris was a 4-time Super Bowl champion, a first team, an NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, an All-Pro, in 1977. He made the Pro Bowl, I think, for 9 straight years in the NFL. And by the way, Franco Harris did not finish his career with the Pittsburgh Steelers because they wouldn't agree to a deal with him. He went to the Seattle Seahawks for his last year. It's one of the things that people always say, like, man, that's one of the saddest pictures is him in that Seahawks uniform. And what's also sad is that had he just stuck with the Steelers, because he went to the Seahawks and he just got 170 rushing yards that year, his last year in Pittsburgh, he had 1,007 yards. He was going to still be a focal point for the Steelers, and he was going to get his carries with the Steelers in 1984. If he had even just played that last year only with the Steelers, he probably gets more than 68 carries. He finished his career with 12,120 rushing yards. Had he just stuck with the Steelers and even just gotten 100 more yards than what he got with the Seahawks, he would have been, or no, excuse me, he would have needed 200 more yards. But if he just gotten 200 more yards than the 170 that he got with the Seahawks over 6 games that he started, he would have finished and retired as the NFL's all-time leading rusher at the time, over Jim Brown. That was the opportunity missed there. And that's no shade to Franco Harris. He's one of the greatest Steelers of all time. But everybody goes up against the team at some point when you're trying to get your negotiations. Jerome Bettis had a situation like that. Hines Ward had a situation like that. And it's funny because when those guys talk to the younger Steelers of today, like back in the 2010s, I remember Jerome Bettis being like, hey, don't try this battle with the Steelers because you will not win unless you're the quarterback. They do not play about trying to hold out and you think you're going to negotiate. That was part of why the Steelers ended up with Antonio Brown, because Mike Wallace was holding out. He thought, nah, man, I deserve that money. And it wasn't that Mike Wallace didn't. He went and got his payday. Congrats to him. But the Steelers were like, well, we're not going to negotiate with you if you don't show up at training camp. So To answer your question here, Paul, I hear that you're frustrated that it's not working out, but TJ Watt is very much a Steeler. And I think the Steelers are working to make him a Steeler for life. I know that there's some rumors out there about what he might have said in previous negotiations or what they might have said in previous negotiations. These teams are not, or these sides are not working together for this long if there's not some harmony there. And again, it's not like when you there's animosity to the team because again, Mike Tomlin's talking to TJ Watt constantly. Alex Highsmith is talking to TJ Watt constantly. All these, Denzel Martin, the outside linebackers coach told us the same thing. Like there is a lot of connections between TJ Watt and the Steelers that I don't think will let this just sour over time. So to answer that, I don't think that that's going to be an issue for the Steelers moving forward when it comes to TJ Watt. I think that he is a Steeler. He wants to get paid like everybody wants to get paid. And I don't think that that's an issue. I think when players want to get paid now, if the team gives you a very reasonable deal, and like in this case, if TJ Watt is getting $41 or $42 million a year, and he turns out he wants $50 million a year, that would be a different story. But we don't know what TJ Watt wants. We don't even know if him holding out right now from minicamp and OTAs is even about that. He might show up to training camp and just be like, oh, yep, just wanted some time off and spend with my family, and here I'm back to go. And who knows? Maybe it is, but we don't know that for sure. So I don't think it's fair to put that on him. I think that TJ Watt is very much a pro Steeler. Heck, Cam Hayward held out at times last year until eventually he came in and was like, no, I wanted to be here. And maybe you could say, hey, Cam Hayward's more of a Mr. Steeler than TJ Watt is. And you know what? If that's TJ Watt's crime, I'll take that 1,000 days out of the week, right? Because Cam Hayward is Mr. Steeler. But I don't think anyone should have sour grapes about how TJ Watt has handled this situation. I think he's doing what he feels he needs right. The team respects that. Football is a business, and sometimes it's a very harsh business. And so players need to do some harsh things sometimes to make their points that they can get the contracts that they feel is right for them. With that point, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, got more questions about how the Steelers front office is working right now. We'll get to those questions here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show taking your calls here on the Locked On Steelers call-in line. As always, you can call in at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute. We'll try to get your calls answered on the show. Also, shout out to everyone who's been calling in. We appreciate you guys, especially a lot of y'all called in after the trade happened. We'll try to get as many as we can. Also, I got to shout out another thing. I am so glad that I did not put Minkah Fitzpatrick on like the image for the call-in thing here, because I did that for George Pickens and it took me forever to take that, to switch it up and make a new one, because I was just not having it. I would have been so mad if I had to change that again. So shout out to me for just not doing that and not having to make that change. But speaking of changes, the front office has been making a lot of changes, and we're talking about like how the business of football goes. And there's some questions about how Omar Khan's been operating. So we're going to answer a couple of those questions right here in this segment. This first one comes from our friend Donnie in North Carolina. Donnie, take it away.
Hey, Chris. This is Donnie calling from North Carolina, and I listen to your show every day. And I'm also one of your admin persons on the Locked On Facebook page. But one of the reasons that I was calling was because I've been a Steelers fan since the 70s, and since Omar Khan has taken over, I am seeing the Steelers do things that I have never seen them done. With that being said, what I was wondering about, what is the process of when there's a player out there that either Mike Tomlin wants or Omar Khan is thinking about, how does that work out, and how does it play in who goes and get the person who has the final decision if they want the person to come or not. So if you could sort of kind of explain how that works, I would greatly appreciate it. Again, love the show. Take care, and looking forward to possibly hearing your answer to this question. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Donnie. As always, calling like he did it, 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. We try to get your question on the show. Also, shout out to Donnie for being one of our admins on the Locked On Steelers Facebook page. I got to shout out to all of our admins, from Ed to Consuela to everybody who does it. If I named all of y'all, it would take me forever to go through the list. But we appreciate our team of moderators there that has cleaned up that page. Y'all done such a great job of doing that. So shout out to y'all for making that a functional group. Because listen, when I was doing that by myself, it was impossible to keep up with all the roles that I had to take on. So y'all make that Facebook group viable. We thank you guys for your service all the time. So thank you so much. And shout out to you, Donnie, for calling in. But let's dive into your question here. So there's several stages to what the Steelers have to do when they want to bring in a player, right? There's tons of scouting involved, because when we think about, scouts, you typically think, oh, those are the guys that go to the college games and they look up the players and then they build the draft boards. And yes, there are college scouts, but there's also pro scouts. And in fact, the current director of pro scouting for the Steelers is Sheldon White. He's a guy, his job is to help keep up with where the rest of the players are around the NFL. And there are plenty of guys that their job is part of what Andy Weidel does, part of what the Steelers have organized in their front office. They keep tabs on players that they like, that they don't like. They talk to Mike Tomlin, they talk to Omar Khan, and they talk about, like, hey, these are the players that we like how they're playing right now. They have their own systems in place to make sure that they are being well aware of how players are playing, where their trends are going, and also, kind of keeping up with the people around those players, their coaches, their trainers, whoever they got relationships with, to learn, are they the right material that you want for the Steelers to add? So that's part of what all those types of conversations, they all come into play. And so they'll have those conversations. If it's a trade, then they'll broach it with the team. They'll try to do as much research as they can to make sure that they're bringing a player into the organization that they feel will embrace the organization. I highly believe that's what was going on with Jalen Ramsey over the past month or so as they were leading up to this trade. And I think that's kind of what the research they do. And then when it comes to free agents, it's the same deal, except you could have a lot more open conversations and just being like, bringing them in. Like, hey, they brought Gabe Davis in, the wide receiver who's a free agent. They bring people in all the time. When they brought Aaron Rodgers in, that whole sit down back in March, that's all that was. Is this like, hey, that's gauging. Do you like us? Do we like you? Bang, bang, boom. They figure that out and they move forward. So there is a process to it. Now, I'm not privy to every step of the project, every stage of the process, but we've heard enough about how the Steelers, like when Mike Tomlin's like, hey, we brought this guy in, we liked him, we think that he brings this, that, and the third. There's a lot that the NFL teams do, some NFL teams do, to clarify those things. And hey, sometimes you also don't learn the right thing. Sometimes players just say what they know you want to hear, and then you might get fooled in the end. Like, Melvin Ingram, who was an outside linebacker, an edge rusher the Steelers brought in a few years back when Bud Dupree went out. Melvin Ingram was told, oh, yeah, I'm fine if Alex Highsmith as a second-year, third-round pick is going to surpass me in year one. I'd be totally fine with that. And then when it actually happened, he wasn't fine with that. And then he was like, trade me, get me out of here. And so then the Steelers were, well, you said you were fine with that, but okay, fine, we'll get rid of you. So I think that sometimes nothing's perfect. It's like interviewing. Like if you've ever interviewed people for jobs, sometimes people that interview, like they're on their best behavior because they want a job and they want to find a way into your organization. And so sometimes you won't get truthfulness there, but there's a whole process for it. I think the Steelers, for the most part, they usually get the guys that they kind of want to fit in. And sometimes they take shots on guys. We really like the talent. Maybe there's some things that are rough around the edges elsewhere, but we're going to try to make it work. But best believe there is a whole process for that. But that's a very good question, because that's not something we often talk about. So there's plenty of people in the Steelers front office that are part of the organizing that, and not just organizing it right when they want to make these moves, but organizing it so that they're keeping up with those types of players all throughout the year, so that by the time it's time to make such a move, they already have plenty of preliminary research out of the way to make sure, like, hey, yeah, this is a move that we're interested in pursuing right here, and not just something that's spring of the moment. Oh yeah, we really want Garrett Wilson from the Jets or whoever they want to make a move for. They have done their homework ahead of time. So good question, Donnie. Let's take one last question here. This one also being on the front office. Now, to be fair to this guy, who's Rich from Tampa Bay, Florida, to be fair to Rich, he asked this months ago, but I thought it was interesting bringing this up now because I've been answering so many different questions. But I thought it was interesting bringing this up now just to kind of bring it and put it into perspective of what the Steelers are doing that could be, like Donnie said, different from how you've understood the Steelers to be. But let's get to Rich's question, and then we'll tailor this. So take it away, Rich.
Hey, Chris, this is Rich from Tampa, Florida. Got a quick question. Absolutely love the show, by the way. Why do the Steelers just always feel like they're looking for the next best deal? I think we look back at the Rams and the Lions over the past 5 to 10 years or whatever, and they always feel like they're just out there to go get it. The Steelers feel like they're always looking for the best deal. When are we going to get to a place where the Steelers are all in financially on a given season? Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rich, for your question. Again, call in like Rich did at 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. Rich, I'm trying to help you out if you're still watching and listening to the show. I hope you are, and I hope you see this. I'm sorry it took so long to get to your question, but we literally have so many. But being fair to Rich's question, I'd like Rich, if you're listening to this, please call in again and let me know your perspective on how you feel about the move since then, because Rich called in February with this, and I think this was before they traded for DK Metcalf, before they signed Aaron Rodgers, before they signed Darius Slay, before they've made all these moves that they have moved, before they definitely got Jalen Ramsey. And I'd like to know what Rich thinks about their moves now. Now, again, I don't think that this means the Steelers are all in, quote unquote, this year. But to answer your question, Rich, I think the Steelers will make those types of all-in moves when they feel like they have enough of the cards in their hand to say, you know what, this is the one we're going to bet on. This is the space we're going to do it. Now, they still won't do it the way like the Rams did when they went all in, because again, the Rams went like 7 straight years without a first round pick. Now, it ended up getting them a Super Bowl, but the Steelers, in the way that they operate, they want to build rosters that have multiple cracks at the egg, like more and more cracks at the egg than just 1 or 2 really good seasons that they hope that they can make it to the Super Bowl, because you've voided so many contracts, you haven't done enough homegrown stuff, and you've kind of put yourself in a position where some teams just naturally aren't going to be Super Bowl contenders. So the reason why the Steelers don't do that philosophy-wise is just because they think it's more valuable to say, hey, we're going to expand our window as much as possible, but they have shown they're willing to go all in and commit on making sure that they have good players around when they have the right guys that they think are that have a Super Bowl window open. Go back to the 2010s. Kevin Colbert didn't sit on his hands. Now, he did have some really big contracts on the books that made it tough to make really super duper aggressive moves, but like the Steelers went out and got guys when they got backup running backs for Le'Veon Bell, whether it was LeGarrette Blount or D'Angelo Williams. They went and tried to make swings on getting wide receivers for Ben Roethlisberger, whether it was, the signing of Antonio Brown, when they drafted Martavis Bryant. They kept getting young receivers to add to the team, and they tried to make big signings here and there. The Steelers have been aggressive, but I think that Steelers fans kind of got lulled by the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era, where his contract was taking up so much space in the Steelers salary cap that it was tough. It was tough to maneuver with that and the other contracts that were on board with Ben Roethlisberger, and the dead money left over from some of those contracts when players were starting to get pulled off the team. That it was tough for the Steelers to be extra aggressive towards the end of Kevin Colbert's tenure. Now, again, Kevin Colbert still made some aggressive moves in his last few years. That trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, despite the fact that they just traded him away now, I'd say was worth it. They gave away a first-round pick, a pick that when the Dolphins used it was for an offensive lineman, I think Austin Jackson, who has not been a 3-time All-Pro safety. And with that, you got 3 years of a superstar safety and other years of being a really good safety out of Minkah Fitzpatrick. And now you flip that into getting a cornerback into your room that you think might be able to pair really well with the best player on your team. So I think that there should be some space for the Steelers there should be some grace to understand the Steelers don't just sit on their hands a lot. And I think, again, for Omar Khan, he's done anything but sit on his hands. This will be the 5th straight season where they've had a different starting quarterback at the start of the season. This will also be you also look at this will also be another year where they have flipped so many rooms upside down. You remember the linebacker room when Omar Khan inherited it. They went and got Cole Holcomb. They went and got Landon Roberts. They went and got Quan Alexander. And two of those, all three of those guys ended up getting hurt. And so then they said, okay, you know what? We're going to get in Patrick Queen. We're going to draft Peyton Wilson. The linebacker room's so different. Look at what they're doing at the offensive line. Look at what they're doing at cornerback. They are turning things over. But you're probably still asking, okay, Chris, I hear all that. But like you're saying, they're not all in yet. Well, we're going back to the poker analogy that I use, that we kind of used with Alan Saunders a couple days ago on the show, right? Do you want to go all in with your chips when you have, as Alan said, pocket sevens? Or do you want to go all in when you got pocket rockets, when you got two aces in your hand and an ace just hit the flop and you're pretty sure, oh, I got the hand this time. I'm going to go all in with this group. That's what I think the Steelers are waiting for. That's also why I think they're trying to not give away their draft picks right now. It's why they aren't all in, because they're trying to create the situation where they can be ready to go all in because they have the right cards in their hands. And one of those cards needs to be a franchise quarterback. One of those cards needs to be a guy that's on the team long-term, who is ready to go, and is a guy that you're willing to build your offense around with a good offensive line, with good playmakers, and a really good defense. You have those cards in your hand, then you're sitting there and you're playing, if we're playing 5-card poker, 5-card draw instead of Texas Hold'em. But if you got 5 cards in your hand, you have a royal flush, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to bet that no one else got a higher royal flush than me in this hand. I'm going to go all in with my chips. I think that's what the Steelers are waiting for before they get so aggressive. But again, sometimes going all in don't work out. Sometimes you can go all in. The Jaguars went all in on their team with some of the moves that they made, and they never got they never got their Super Bowl. And their team ended up breaking up shortly after their 2017 run because of it. In fact, when they went all in, they made some additions, and they had Doug Marrone, and they thought they were going to be it. After them going all in, they went 5-11 after they beat the Steelers in the playoffs and lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Still think they were robbed in that one, by the way. Miles Jack was going to score a touchdown. But their records since then, before they eventually gutted everything and rebuilt it with Trevor Lawrence and are still struggling with that, they went 5-11, 6-10, 1-15, 3-14. The Jacksonville Jaguars, their team, they swung, they went and they made some aggressive plays to get some guys, and they were competitive, but it was a short window. And that's what the Steelers don't want to have. I think build their window. They want a decently sized window for them to be aggressive. So they will be aggressive. Heck, I think they are aggressive in the moves they're making, but they're not going to mortgage any parts of their future until they see the current has a really good chance to actually be a Super Bowl champion. Because again, Kevin Colbert was willing to do those things back when the Steelers were in those situations. And I think Omar Khan will be willing to as well. But I still think that in all of this, you still need to abide by the principles that build you to be a Super Bowl contender in the first place. Like in the draft, stick to best player available. Don't reach for positions just because you need them. Because I think that losing that principle is what got Kevin Colbert a lot of the misses towards the end of his career. Going for Terrell Edmonds at safety because they really, really could have used a safety at the time instead of getting maybe the best player on the board that they had. That hurt the team in the long run. And I think that when you look at several of those picks, you could say that that's kind of what happened there. Was they got a little too specific, position specific, because they were trying to be aggressive to load up with the right things and try to strike while the iron was hot at the time. But that's a tricky balance, right? Because you can say, well, hey, are they sticking to their principles of best player available? Are they sticking to the principles of trying to make sure that the window of the future is still open? Or how much should they take away from that to go and invest in players that are going to help them win right now, and not developmental players that are going to be in their prime, maybe when your current core starts to get too old to be the best players that they are? That's always something to consider. But it's a complex question. It's why it's such a fascinating game. It's why it's it's not a science, it's an art as far as how teams build their rosters. And it'll be interesting to see how Omar Khan's legacy gets built as we start to see some of these younger players that he drafted a couple years ago and last year build into being veterans on the team. Which ones stick around, which ones don't. And then if the Steelers do get that window, if they do strike at quarterback, if they do feel confident there, and several of the other guys developing the future leaders for the Steelers, how aggressive will they be when that time happens? So it's a good question. All good questions here. Appreciate you, Rich, calling in back in February when you did. Again, call in and let me know what you think about the moves since you made that call, and if you feel like Omar Khan is doing things a little bit differently than you thought he was. I'll be intrigued to see that, but I definitely think you're right on something there. Thanks to everyone to call into to today's show, and thank you to everyone for tuning into today's show. Again, this is the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all social media all the same handle everywhere. It's at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. I wrote recently about some advanced analysis on Jalen Ramsey and Minka Fitzpatrick and why the move made sense. And then today, you should be seeing a film study out on Jalen Ramsey in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Go check out both of those there at post-gazette.com. But check out this show, the Locked On Steelers podcast, every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it on YouTube. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those Monday through Friday episodes, and be sure to check out all of our bonus content when we release it throughout time. We're going to be back tomorrow with another episode here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.